Hey everyone, and welcome to this super straightforward mini course. What I want to show you today is how to create these two animations here. They're really simple to achieve, so let's just head straight into it. So what I have here are some really simple catalog photos. Neutral pose, white background. This makes for great base photos for this kind of animation. So what I'll do as the first step is just import this into Photoshop and remove this background here so we have some transparency to work with. Photoshop makes this really easy for us nowadays. Back in the day we had to trace this out, maybe use the magic wand tool or use the magnetic lasso, but nowadays you just press remove background and bam, you're done. Usually this works pretty well if you have a neutral background like I do here. You can also use the select subject tool and then create a mask from that, but just to save time, remove background and bam, you're done. All right, we're pretty much done in Photoshop here. Obviously you want to do this to all of your photos, but all that's left to do in Photoshop is export this. So I'll go to File, Export As, and then save this as a .png file because this preserves the transparency of the file. Maximum quality, that's fine, and press Export. Right, then we can already jump into After Effects, and what I'll do first is just create a new composition. I like working with 4:5 aspect ratios or square aspect ratios, but obviously it always depends on what the client is requesting from you for the delivery format. But in this case, 2000 pixels by 2500 pixels is fine. I'll call this main and make it, 200 frames long is fine, 30 frames per second. Press OK. Next, I'll just create a simple background. I'll press Ctrl or Command Y to bring up a new solid. I can also go to Layer, New Solid over here. But try to get used to these keyboard shortcuts. It really does save you a lot of time in the long run. But when you're starting out, you can also use these layer menus up here just to help you get going a bit. I'll call this background because this will be our background. Make sure it's the comp size. It's going to be pure white for me. And just press OK. Okay, so we have our background ready. Now I have to import my files. So I'll just drag my transparency catalog images into this section over here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll select all of my layers, just drag them over my background, and I want to make this 3D. So the first thing I want to do is create a new camera. I'll go up to Layer, New, Camera. I think 35 millimeters is fine for something like this. Maybe even go 50. This is a matter of taste. I'll go for 35 right now. And I have no 3D layers yet because none of these layers are 3D enabled. So I'll do this next. I'll select all of my photos here and check this 3D box icon. This will turn all of these layers 3D. As you can see, if I now rotate one of them, we have some 3D action going on. First thing I want to change, because we get this weird shadow here, I want to add an even light to this whole scene. So what I'll do is I'll go to Layer, New Light, and just create an ambient light at 100% and white. This will get rid of all of our shadows. So the idea for this human carousel animation is that we want to have each of these models angled differently. And the easiest way to go about this is just to do some simple math. We have 3 models, so we want to divide 360 degrees by 3, which leaves us with 120 degrees. So what I'll do is I'll go into my top camera view, so we see these layers from the top, and just select all of my layers, press R on my keyboard to bring up the rotation properties, and then we want to change the Y rotation. You can see as I just crank this up, you can see the layer in the middle is going to rotate. So I'll take the second layer here, just enter a Y rotation of 120 degrees, press enter, and then for the third one, I'll do double that, so 240 degrees, and that's perfect. So you can see we now have this hexagon shape going on. If I go back to my active camera, you'll see they're folded out in a way. Now, they're not perfectly aligned because obviously the models aren't going to be perfectly centered in each photo, so I'll have to do some manual adjusting. I'll select one of these layers. I can just drag this out until I'm happy. Maybe this one has to go a bit more to the right. That's cool. I'm actually now thinking maybe 35 millimeters was a bit too wide for something like this, so I'll double click my camera and change this to 50. Then press P on my keyboard and just zoom out here a bit. Yeah, this is better. It gives us a bit more of compression so they don't warp in weird ways. I'll collapse all of these just to keep things tidy. Now, all that's left to do essentially for this first animation is create a null object that controls the entire scene. So I want each of these layers to be controlled by one rotation property. So what I'll do is I'll go to Layer, New, Null Object. And this is essentially just an invisible point that has some properties like rotation and position. And I can now connect these layers to this null and then control each of these layers with this master rotation property. So I'll call this rotation. Actually, I'll just press enter to rename this, keep things a bit tidier. Select all of these photos and grab this pick whip and select the rotation null object we just created. This means if I now make this 3D as well, because we want to have 3D controls for the null object, and bring up the rotation, you can see if I rotate this, all of my models start to rotate. And this is essentially how this is going to be animated. So what I'll do is I can either just, drop a keyframe at 0 frames by pressing the stopwatch, go forward in my timeline to, 100 frames, and then let's say I want to do one full rotation, so 360 degrees. And this means that we just get this really simple rotation here. This is one way to do it. I prefer for like constant animations like this where the pace is just really constant. It's just supposed to rotate around and around until infinity. What I prefer to do is use a simple expression, and I can do this by alt-clicking or option-clicking on this stopwatch I just used before. This will bring up my expression box, and I can just type in time times and then a value like 100. And you can see this just gives us constant rotation. Maybe this is a bit fast, so I'll just go back in here and reduce this to 60. Whoops, 60. And this will make the animation a bit slower. But this is pretty cool. So all that's left to do now is just add some cool typography around this, whatever layout you want to go for. And then, it's ready to go on some sort of ad screen in the city or be part of an email campaign for a clothing brand. And we have a happy client. Let's go over to the next animation, which is also really simple to set up. So I'll just, duplicate my composition here, open this up, and let's start from scratch. So I'll delete all of these layers. I'll drag in, just one layer for now. We can always switch these out later just to set this up. Make it 3D again. Oops, we have to add a camera as well. So I'll go to camera, new camera. Or actually, you know what? For this one, we'll go a bit wider. We'll do even 28 millimeters because I think for this one, it could work really well. I'll create my ambient light as well. Same as before, just to avoid any of these nasty shadows. It evens out beautifully. And then what I'll do is I'll just create, a bunch of copies, press Command or Control D, press R to bring up the rotation. I will go back into my top view here. And for this one, we don't have to be as precise as the other one. We can just crank this in all different sorts of directions, the Y rotation that being. Just giving each of these layers some space to breathe, maybe fill this one in here. And then when I go back to my active camera, it'll look really crazy. Maybe that's something you want to go for. Look, the cool thing about this whole neutral pose and white background transparency thing allows for a lot of experimentation. So I'm just showing you 2 animations here, but you can just go wild with this and do whatever you want. Do crazy camera moves, rotate layers in all different ways, and it'll almost always kind of look cool because it's really reduced and minimal. I think this style works really well for playful animation, so just knock yourself out. But for this one, we now want to expand all of these, so they're kind of looking at the camera from different angles, and then have them rotate around in a big circle. So the way I can do this is just select all of my layers, press A on my keyboard to bring up the anchor point, and then take this last value, the Z value, and just crank this all the way up or down until we're happy with the result. We still have some gaps to fill in, so I can do this by just going into my top view again. The camera looks into this direction. I'll just select all of my layers again, press R to bring up the rotation, and I'll just adjust some of these. We have a lot going on here, so I just want to space this out a bit better. Something like this. We can always add more of these photos later by just duplicating one of them and then just adjusting the rotation, you know? It's really simple. Now these could either all stay on the same radius in this one circle, or we could even go a bit more crazy with this, bring up the anchor point again and just create different anchor points, so different spaces from the camera for each of these. I did this in the original example just to add a bit more variety to this animation. I think it makes it more interesting, just adds more depth as well, because you have some of them be in the background and some more in the foreground. So I do recommend doing this, but obviously this is a stylistic choice. So I'll go back to my active camera, and you can see now they kinda, this is not enough for me yet. I think I want to go a bit more crazy. Yeah, just put some of them really in the background, you know? Okay, to again create this rotation animation, I'll do the same thing as before. I'll go to Layer, New, and Null Object. Call this Rotation. And then I'll select all of my layers, parent them to the null object, make this 3D as well, don't forget that. Now let's do the same thing as before. Press R to bring up the rotation, Alt-click on the Y rotation and enter in times, which is this asterisk mark, right? 60. And you can see we have a rotation animation going on like in the original example. What if we want to exchange some of these to not only have the same dude be multiplied 10 times, but have some more variety in the outfits and the models? This is really simple to do. What I can do is just, select one of these and then go up here, select one of these photos and press Alt or Option, hold it down, and then drag it over this. And you can see this just switches out the layer. It tells this layer to reference a different photo. I'll do this with the other ones as well, just alternate between these different outfits. I can even do multiple ones. I can select two of these by holding Control or Command and selecting multiple, and then just going over here, pressing Alt and dragging it over these, and this just replaces 3 of them at once. Again, the idea here is to just experiment around, go wild, maybe even put some of them above and some of them below, something I haven't tried yet. Always change some values, hit play, see how it looks, see if you like it, see why you like it, why you don't like it, and then just adjust from there. That's the whole name of the game. The final thing I want to share with you is how to do this inverted text I have in the middle in my original example. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new composition for my text, call this text, press OK. I'll create a new bit of text by double-clicking on the text tool, just going for whatever name of the brand, let's say Luft here. I think this effect works best with a bold typeface because then we have a lot of area to see the inversion. So I have bold selected here. I'll center this by going to my Align tool. If you don't see this, this is over at Windows and then Align. Make sure this is enabled. This is really handy. I'll just drop this right in the center. Okay, so now I'll go back to my main animation and just drag in this text comp. You won't really be able to see it because it's white, but that doesn't matter because we only need to have the alpha value of this composition. So we want to tell After Effects to apply an inversion effect to only the area that this text occupies. I could do this by pressing this icon right here, which is called Adjustment Layer, okay? By pressing this, we are turning this text into an adjustment layer, and any effect we apply to this comp will be applied to everything that's below it. So if I go to Effect, Channel, and Invert, you can now see that the text leaves these inverted colors behind it, which is exactly what we want. The reason we didn't add the text directly to this composition is we want to work procedurally. So now I can just go in here and add a second piece of text or whatever, do whatever I want with this, and you can see the effect updates immediately. And that's exactly what we want. This just allows us to work a lot faster and gives us more flexibility. So you can see now when I play this animation, we have this cool inversion effect going on as we do in the original example. That's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and learning some new techniques. These are really simple. It's nice to know that you can create some interesting work with just, the basics of After Effects. You just have to have some sort of concept, play around with it, experiment a lot. Don't be afraid to just do some crazy things and see how it looks. It was a pleasure, and see you in the next one.